can and say will be recorded and in the video for later. So the recording is active now. So let's kick in and get started. So welcome to the December 10th meetup for the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group, the Power BI track. Today we're looking at data analytics in Visio. Really? Visio? By Scott Helmer. So we're super excited to see this. The general schedule we're going to go with here. We're in the welcome and overview now. We'll take 5 minutes to do that. We're going to kick it over to Joseph Yeates to do the what's new in Power BI, or rather in this case, I'm going to show you some cool tricks because there hasn't been any what's new in Power BI for this month. And then we'll turn it over to Scott, and Scott can run from whenever Joseph is done until whenever Scott wants to finish. So that's the kind of the normal sort of normal that we go with. So before we get started, a big thanks to the sponsors that we have for this. Excel Guru, my company that sort of hosts the event, and skillwave.training, our training platform, and obviously also Microsoft for helping us out with everything that they do along the way, which is not insignificant. I'm super pleased to say that we've actually got meetups scheduled in the Excel track all the way through up to and including the April meetup already, which is unbelievable. I've got the next 2 Power BI meetups already scheduled as well. So kicking off in January, Wynn Hopkins is going to be joining us. We're going to be starting earlier at 5 p.m. Pacific to make it a little bit easier, because Wynn's going to be phoning in all the way from Perth, Australia, and he's going to be giving us the why you need Excel 365, all the new features, and a whirlwind tour, which is going to be kind of interesting. I'm looking forward to see how far back he goes on this one. And then our first Power BI track of the month, we've got Parv Chana is going to be giving us a deep dive into Power BI paginated reports using Power BI datasets. So no doubt another exciting session coming up from there as well. The Global Excel Summit is coming up, streaming worldwide on February 6th through 9th. So if you're looking for some cool training options here, up to the day before Christmas Eve, so Christmas Eve, you can get 10% off if you use this code to register. I would definitely recommend checking out. It's going to be full of experts, all kinds of awesome content that will be there. We're also always keen to get your opinions on the survey. This is actually for the Excel team. They'd love to hear what you like about Excel user groups and Power BI user groups, all those kind of things, why you come to these things and whatnot. So if you haven't filled it out, here is the link, the aka.ms/XLUG survey. Only 5 questions long, not a huge amount of stuff, but please do throw in your answers on that as well. And all of the slide deck here and the links are available already on the Meetup site tonight. The last thing I want to throw out on this one here is, as I say, we're already booking into New Year for our speakers. If you're interested in taking your hand at a speaker slot and showing some of the cool stuff that you do, you know what? Just go in and fill out this little survey here. Tell us what you want to talk about. One of the speakers that's coming up has already done that, filled out their form. That's going to be our April user group meeting for the Excel track. That's going to be a new speaker. We're super excited about that, and we'd love to have more. So, please do contribute if you're interested. And that is 6:03. I'm 2 minutes early. Look at all that time you got, Joseph. It is time for you to take over and show us more stuff.
Well, you set the bar so high with the, we'll sort of start, and then someone will finish, and then someone else will start. So
well, you kind of told me you didn't have you were just going to show a quick tip, I think is what you said. So I'm looking at it going, all right, how much is there? And on a day when you maybe don't need all the time, that's the day I finish early, right?
Exactly. So, exactly. It's always the way. It's always the way.
There you go, man. It is all yours. I can see your screen. You're good to go.
Perfect. All right. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We were just saying before, can't believe we're already at the end of the year, and they're in the December meetup group for Power BI. Been a weird year, obviously, but thank you, everyone, for attending and for coming every month. So I usually present what's new in Power BI, and this month there has been no release in December. So I am going to show cool little trick or technique that I've used in some of my Power BI, a few of my Power BI reports. But just before we get into that, just want to introduce myself to those of you who may not have seen me present before, or maybe this is your first time at the Vancouver Power BI user group. So my name is Joseph Yeates. I'm a data analyst at Blue Shore Financial, which is a credit union in North Vancouver. As part of my role, I model, manipulate, analyze, and visualize data using SQL Server, Power Query in Excel, RStudio, and of course, Power BI. My website's up there at feathersanalytics.com, where I blog about all things R, Power BI, but really how to bring those two things together and how to make some more advanced analytics more accessible to business users of reports. I also have my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles up there. So if you have any questions that come up after today, or you just want to reach out and talk about some cool data stuff that you're doing, more than happy to connect. And yeah, I love talking with others in the community. With that, I'm just quickly going to jump into the Power BI blog. So usually at this point, I will show the actual blog post that talks about some of the new features in the monthly release. But one thing I don't think I've highlighted before is just the Power BI blog here. So they talk about all things like on-prem gateway, Power BI report server updates, new functionality that's becoming generally available for Power BI Premium. Sort of your one-stop shop for all the updates across all the different versions of Power BI that you can be using. So if you need more information or you want to sort of get up to speed on what's new and what's coming, this would be a great place to start as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into my quick summary, my quick presentation of one of the techniques that I've used in some of my reporting before. I don't really have a snazzy, like, good marketing title for this yet, so we're just sort of going to roll with it. And if anyone has any ideas, you can definitely leave them in the chat, or again, feel free to connect on social media. So the starting point for this is we have a table in Excel, and we have broken down by products and product category. So all of our products in this case are different items of clothing, and the categories are how we can group those together. So like t-shirts, hoodies, jeans, shirts, pants, shoes. And for each of them, we have the associated revenue, cost, and then income as well. So really basic data set. So I connected to this in my Power BI report and I actually spun off a few different tables. So I connected to products here, and as we can see, this is exactly what was in Excel. I've just brought this into Power BI. I also spun off a category and a products filter table. But before I get into too much detail with that, why don't we actually jump into the report and look at the final results and what I was trying to achieve. So not too long ago, an ask came to me for a report that we want to filter the report by an individual product. So if we look at like plain t-shirt, for example. But when we drill down to plain t-shirt, we don't just want to analyze that specific product. We want to analyze the other products within that product category. So when I first built this, I was actually doing this. It was a customer analysis for some of our clients at work. And we'd built a clustering algorithm actually in R, and we would bring it into a Power BI report. And what we wanted to do is that when a business user is using the report and they're analyzing a specific client, by picking that client, they wanted to bring in and analyze and compare that client to others in the same cluster as them. So that's what we're doing here. Is what we want to do with this report is select a product, but when we select a product, we want to look at all the other products within that same category. So how it's set up right now is sort of how it would be in a standard report. And right now, if I drill down just to like plain t-shirt or one individual product, everything gets filtered down, and all that's being cross-filtered or highlighted here is the plain t-shirt, and my scatter chart over here is just filtered down to that one individual product as well. And that's the same thing if I filter by the cost. We're only looking at skinny jeans, and it's filtered there. So how I was able to build the report solution, and what I want to do is if I just pick like, what's a good one? Joggers. just by picking the product of joggers, I'm now looking at everything within the category of pants. So we're looking at sweatpants, athletic pants, and joggers there. Let's filter out that. So how did I achieve this? Well, so I started with my basic data source, and I spun off a category table. So all I did here is I referenced that source data. I removed all the other columns. I just wanted my categories, and I created a distinct list of all the categories that's in my products table. My next step was to create a separate products table. It's going to act as that filter. So it's a products filter table. And I did something similar. I referenced my source data. I removed all the columns except for product and product category. And all I did was rename my product column from product to product filter. I'm just going to close that out. So how I modeled this is I have my products table with all my information, and we have a one-to-many relationship between product category in my category dimension and category in my products table. The product filter, I've actually done same thing, originally a one-to-many join between product category here to act as a bridge table. But what I've done, and I know that Ken runs a data modeling class and he's probably pulling his hair out and giving me very dirty looks behind the camera. But I made this a bi-directional relationship. So basically what this means is rather than just category being able to filter the products table and filter the product filter, I've changed this round. So now this filtering can go in both directions, essentially. So this product filter can, through going through the category table, can filter products as well. So if I go back to my report and I just do a little bit more space here, I'm just going to drop my product category onto a table here. And this product filter, which I've dropped on the filter pane, is coming from my product filter dimension. So now whenever I select athletic fit, that filters my product category to be one thing, to be jeans. And then it's the product category that filters my product table as opposed to an individual product if I was building a relationship based on that field. So as I click down and I see like button up, that means that it's shirts that's coming up. And so all the shirts are being returned. If I go to no iron is another type of shirt. Like pullover will be a type of hoodie. So I have full zip and pullover. And so this just gives a little bit different type of filtering. Usually how we would do this in a report is just have like a category filter on the side. But what this allows us to do is rather than have to pick a specific product category and return it, we can just pick an individual product, and then we have that comparison built in to other products within the same category. So just quite a specific scenario, different type of filtering, a little bit of different type of data modeling than I've seen before. And as I've said, I've used this techniques in a few different reports, and I've done this with wanting to analyze customers compared to other customers within the same category, products, accounts, anything that can be grouped together and you want to do a comparison within that group, we can use this technique. So that is my that's my little Power BI trick or tip for today. And as there was no release, but just wanted to thank everybody again for participating in the Vancouver Power BI Meetup group this year. It's been so great that we've been able to keep this going virtually. Want to wish everyone happy holidays, have a happy new year, and I really excited to kick off 2021 soon as well. So thank you all, and I'm going to pass it back to Ken for the feature presentation.
Awesome, thanks, Joseph. That's a cool trick. Interesting. I might have to go and try and play with that one.
Nice.
All right. So thanks, Joseph, again for everything that you've done for this year. I mean, obviously it's oftentimes under the gun trying to prepare a presentation with what's new with sometimes about 24 hours notice. You do a fantastic job for it. I really appreciate it, and I know everybody here is obviously appreciates the work that you put into this as well. So it's been fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's turn it over to Scott then. No time to waste. He's on the east coast of the country, and we
Just
probably
like
want to
John.
make sure that. What's that?
Just like John.
Yeah, well, just like John, but John's a 24-hour party animal. We found out, right? I'm not sure if that's actually the case for you or not. And I'm thinking, you might actually want to go to bed at some point in time tonight. So we should probably let you get your presentation underway and whatnot. So if you want to take over the screen, the floor is all yours. I will be going through and making sure that everybody's microphone is muted. Although if you like, Scott, as you're going through, I can moderate the chat for you and let you know if any questions come up, or you can watch it yourself. What's your preference?
Actually, if you're willing to moderate the chat, that would be wonderful.
Happy to do so. No problem at all. All right, cool. We can see your screen. I think you're good.
Okay. That's perfect. Well, thank you. Yes, I am hanging around here on the East Coast, but this is in a curious turn of events. This has actually been West Coast week for me. I just finished at 6 p.m. this evening, my time, a 3-day seminar for a client in Seattle. So I've been sort of halfway between East Coast and West Coast for much of the week. The thing I want to do this evening is, I hope, open some eyes to capabilities in Visio that you may or may not have ever run across before. In fact, I'm going to ask you, before I get started, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about what you might be familiar with. So here's the first of a couple of poll questions. If you'll grab your phone and go to the address at the top, menti.com, either phone, browser on a computer, whatever, any browser. Go to menti.com and enter the 7 digits that you see to the right, and you will be able to answer this question. So I'm curious to know what kinds of diagrams you typically create for those of you who do use Visio. Floor plans, org charts, network diagrams, what are the key types that you use? And if you have a couple of answers, go right ahead. I'll just wait a second until a couple of them pop up on the screen. Flowcharts, not surprising, that's the first one that appears. Microsoft says roughly 30% of all Visio diagrams are created from one of the several flowchart templates. So that's pretty common. Just wait for 1 or 2 more. I'm interested to see what other sort of diagrams people do create. There we go. ERD, flowcharts, don't use Visio, fair enough. Network diagrams, data models, process diagrams of various sorts. There are actually 15 separate templates in Visio Professional or Visio Plan 2, the online version. 15 separate templates that create various kinds of process maps. So it's everything from flowcharts to various other styles of process model. So great. Flowchart is still there large in the center. So clearly that's among the 15 people who've answered so far, that's still the most popular choice. So not a big surprise. Bill of materials, product bill of materials. Yeah, cool. All right, well, I have a second question, and I'm expecting to see somewhat different answers to this question than for a typical audience where I present. And that is, how many times have you created data visualizations of any type? And this, you have a choice here from ranging from never to all day, every day. Okay, a few of you in the never category. Typical audience when I do this presentation, it's often, I do a lot of, I'm basically a business process consultant when I'm not doing Visio things, and even when I am doing Visio things. So a lot of the time that I am presenting, it's to an audience of business analysts or business process folks. So they tend to be on the lower end of the range here. Folks like you who are active Power BI users, for those of you in the audience who are, you may be in that occasionally, frequently, or all day, every day category. So good. We can come back later if you're actually interested in the final results. I'll be happy to come back later. Just remind me toward the end. But let's move on to the next question, final one for the moment. Some of you have already gotten there. Great. So what do you use to create visualizations? Drive IO, frequently. It looks like those are a couple of answers from the last question. Click. I'm familiar with it, but I've not used it. Power BI, Excel, larger than life, right in the center. I think John Pelletier is out there and Ken are out there, typing Excel in 13 times. But okay, good. Not surprisingly, I don't see Visio on the list, and that's okay. But what I'm hoping is if I came back 2 months from now and asked the same question, might be slightly different answer. So let's talk about why I'm even daring to ask the question, can you do visualizations of data in Visio? Here's where we're headed. I want to show you how to create examples like a floor plan that's annotated automatically with who sits where in an office, or an organization chart that has a legend in the upper right. And I'll show you a more detailed zoom in of that slide later, or of the actual diagram later on. But of an organization chart that not only shows who reports to whom, but actually shows quarterly performance numbers for the managers, the red shapes on the list, one of whom, by the way, toward the top, might look a little bit familiar if you look closely. In the upper right-hand corner of each shape is a graphic that represents how each employee is doing, meeting their training goals for the year. So you'll see 25 quartiles, I guess you'd say, for performance. So this is 100% Visio, and more about how coming up in a moment. For those of you who create network diagrams, here's an example. Not only, as we see in the legend, do we see some idea of CPU speed, so there are green bars for each of the servers that show a CPU speed in that box, but also the server color reflects dynamic status. So we can see which servers are green, which ones are yellow, which ones are red. At a glance, I get a whole different level of information than just having a topology diagram that tells me what's plugged in where. Here's a simple flow chart. The boxes, the tasks in the flow chart are colored based on status. In the legend, we can see, actually I can zoom in on that even here. In the legend, we can see that the colors represent whether the task has been completed, is still in progress, or not yet started. So we've got power to do these kinds of things, but there are a couple of basic ideas we need to talk about first in order to get there. We're going to talk about working with data in a diagram, visualizing that data using some of the tools that are in Visio, linking a diagram to external data for reasons that will become clear once you see the first two things the first two things are possible. We'll look at integration between Visio and Power BI. There is a Visio custom visual available in Power BI. It's been there for a couple of years now. I'll close with some Visio resources, Q&A, and Ken, I am happy to answer questions along the way, so please feel free to interrupt me if any do appear in the chat. And for that matter, if I didn't look at the count to see how many people are here, but I'm more than happy to have people turn their mics on and ask questions directly. So if there are any remaining questions toward the end, we'll leave a block of time available for that. So who am I? I am a partner at a company in the Boston area called Harvard Computing Group. My partner, Mike Cunningham, and I have been doing business process consulting of various sorts for the better part of the last 25 years. And it was actually in the process of discovering and trying to fill a need that I ended up learning a whole lot about Visio. The result of that particular learning exercise was this thing you see highlighted here called Task Map. We had discovered in our early process consulting days that there wasn't a good way for people to create data-rich process maps. Flowcharts are useful. They're pictures of a process, so we get a visual idea, but most flowcharts consist of little more than text on boxes. So our goal was to build a way so that our clients and others could take advantage of the power of Visio without having to know much at all about Visio itself, actually. We tried to, in a sense, put blinders on, so Visio did one thing really, really well. And that one thing was to make it easy to create process maps and make it equally easy for people to read these content-rich maps. We didn't want people to need a PhD in process in order to read a task map. So That's it about TaskMap. Go to taskmap.com if you want more information. One of my examples coming up happens to be a task map, but that's clearly not the focus for tonight. It was in the process of discovering a lot about the internals of Visio in developing TaskMap that led to an email one day that said, "Hey Scott, congratulations, you've been named an MVP for Visio." And with all deference to Ken and John Marshall and John Pelletier and some of the other MVPs in the audience, I have to admit, when I got that email, I'd never heard of the MVP program. I didn't even know what it was. But in my annual awards since then, for which I'm very grateful, it's become a powerful part of my professional life. I've developed half a dozen courses, mostly about Visio, for LinkedIn Learning, so you can find them online. And I've written a couple of books about Visio as well. So with that said, let's talk about working with data in a diagram. But first, I have one more question. Same menti.com site, same serial number. Simple question. Did you know that you can, and have you incorporated data into a Visio diagram? That very first answer, I'm just guessing that was you, John Marshall, but we'll wait and see what that blue part of the pie ends up looking like. So, not an unusual result. My experience, and John Marshall's as well, is that data in Visio diagrams is one of those well-kept secrets. There's so much cool stuff that you can do, but it's you know, there's a lot of spreading the word yet to be done. So bear with me, and I will show you some ways to do that. The key to working with data in a diagram, first of all, is to know that it's possible, but the second is to know how to open something called the shape data window. Shape data is the Microsoft name for the fields that can reside inside a shape. And as you'll see in a moment, many existing shapes in diagrams you've probably created in the past already contain data fields. How do you find this out? If you right-click any shape, select Data, and then Shape Data, a window like this appears with hovering over the drawing window. Typically, that's where it is. I'll show you what I like to do with it in a moment just for positioning, but it is a simple window that lists a field name and a place to put a value or a place to display the current value. Something like this flowchart shape, that happens to be a process shape from a flowchart, contains 7 predefined fields. So every flowchart you've ever created or every flowchart you've ever looked at actually contains 7 data fields that many of you had no idea were there. Well, now you do. And again, any shape, no matter what kind of diagram it is, right-click the shape, choose Data, and then Shape Data, and that will open the window. Now, for some shapes, you'll do that and discover that, in fact, there isn't any data associated with that shape. There are no fields defined inside the shape, and that's cool. I'm going to show you how to add fields, too. And that's this dialog. If you right-click, and in the lower left corner of my slides, you'll see the quick tips on the breadcrumb trail for how to get to this feature. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but if you are interested in a copy of these slides that have some of these graphics and tips in them, just send me an email. I put my email address at the beginning. I'll do it at the end, scott@visiostepbystep.com, and I'll be happy to send a PDF of these slides so that you have them for reference. If you right-click within the shape data window or right-click on any shape and then choose Data and define Shape Data, this is the dialog in which you can give a field, a new field, a name, indicate in the type box what kind of field it is, fill in a few more things, and you now have a data field in a shape. So I mentioned that many existing types of diagrams already contain data fields, and these are just a sampling of them. Some of the most common diagram types, like org charts, cross-functional flow charts, electrical diagrams, org charts, network diagrams, and so forth. Office layouts especially. I'm actually doing a project for a client right now where we are helping them to automate the move of equipment and furniture from one building to another, because it's something that they do fairly frequently. Even in this era, they're still looking forward to the times when they'll be doing that again. But we're helping to link their diagrams to data sources so that they can set flags to indicate which sets of furniture need to be moved, and we can generate some reports, that kind of thing. Very, very convenient way to leverage the data handling capabilities in Visio. So once we have data in a diagram, once we know those fields are there, or we've added our own fields, and we've put values into those fields, it's really convenient to be able to see that data. And there are some reports, I'll talk about those coming up a little bit, but mostly what I want to talk about is ways that you can visualize. So in Visio, look for the Data tab. Now, if in your copy of Visio you don't have a Data tab, that means you have Visio Standard. And Visio Standard does not have most of the capabilities I'm going to talk about tonight. The existence of data fields, the ability to put data into them, to produce reports, to get data back out, that's there in all versions of Visio. But the cool stuff, visualizations, linking to external data sources, that's all in the professional edition of Visio, or in what's called Visio Plan 2 that I referred to earlier. Visio Plan 1, just as a quick aside, is a browser-based version of Visio, runs in any browser on any device, and it truly does. It works just fine in Safari on an iPad. It's a way to create true Visio diagrams using nothing more than a web browser on any device. It does not have a lot of the cool stuff that we're talking about. For that, you do need Plan 2. So professional or Plan 2. So what can we visualize? Well, here's a flow chart in which we are looking at risk. So we've done some risk analysis here. The flags in the legend suggest the levels of risk denoted by each color. The owner of the task is used to color. It's a feature called color by value. So each shape in the process bears a color based on who the process owner is. And then there's a thermometer to indicate the relative cost of executing this step in the process. And oops, pardon me, I clicked the button by mistake. Let's go back. There we go. All of these graphics, these data graphics, as they're called in Visio, are dynamic. So if the underlying data changes, the graphics change. So the colors of the flags will change, the level of mercury or red in the thermometer will go up and down. It's also important to know that that legend that you see was also generated automatically by Visio. There's a button on the Data tab that says Legend, and if you click it, you will end up with a legend like this based on whatever data you've chosen to visualize. So is there anybody in the audience who's saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea any of this was possible? I suspect that's true, but let's keep going because there's more. Here's that org chart example I showed you in a slightly more zoomed in form. That legend also generated automatically. In this case, we're looking at the two things I mentioned before. We're looking at how each employee is doing against their training quota for the year in the upper right. And for the managers, we see quarterly performance numbers represented as a bar graph. Now, I don't know about you, but typically if somebody says, I need a bar graph to represent quarterly performance, I'm probably going to go running to Excel, right? Most of you do, from the size of Excel on the word cloud earlier, or perhaps Power BI. But here's a case where you can actually achieve that visualization, have Visio create the bar chart for you automatically with a couple of clicks. Third example, a different style of network diagram, a different network example than what we looked at before. We're looking at CPU speed, we're looking at status. Notice now the status is represented as traffic light icons rather than changing the color of the servers themselves. Easy either way, and easy to change from one to the other. So if we want to visualize data in Visio, we can. It's not new. This has actually been available in Visio since Visio 2007. The steps for creating a visualization, a data graphic, are pretty straightforward. You tell Visio what data field in the shapes you want to visualize. You select one of a variety of graphic types that are predefined, and then you position the graphic. There are defaults for the second and third, or you can choose to do whatever you want. And if you have additional graphic items, you can add multiple graphic items to any one visualization. And that's, if I just go back one slide, That's exactly what you're seeing in these cases. Each of these visualizations happen to have a couple of different graphic items per shape. So pretty straightforward. I will show you exactly how in just a moment. So here's an example. This happens to be one of the times that you'll see a task map on here. Each of these rectangles with the arc over the top represents a task. There's a description of the work. The role name at the top center is the responsible role. And then there are other data fields that can appear down below. On top of that, we've layered some visualizations, in this case, flags for risk, as we had in a previous example. And also now we've got a set of icons that indicate how we're doing actual against budget. In this case, I created this diagram for a client. They happen to use Project Online as their project management. So we linked Visio to Project Online, and as they update in Project Online, that data feeds back into Visio, and these icons turn from the green circle with a check mark to the triangle with the exclamation point if the data value goes above more than 10 or up to 10% of the estimate or of the budget. So it's not just static data. We actually have the ability to be, I won't say real time, because there may be some steps along the path that require either a piece of code or a manual refresh or a timed refresh, but it can be as near real time as you want it to be. Different graphic types. I mentioned there is a variety of types that are built in. There are text callouts, so I can take text data from a shape and represent it either just in a box near the shape, or as you see, some of the text boxes have icons in front of them. So if I'm representing dollar values or euros, or if I'm representing server performance, I might use the icon that represents the server. There are icon sets. Those are collections of 2 to 5 icons. And when I select an icon set, then I just use a couple of drop-down menus and a few clicks to tell Visio, under this circumstance, this icon appears, under this circumstance, this icon appears, and so forth. Data bars are particularly well suited for numeric data. It's the data bars like the thermometer that allow me to show relative costs, or progress indicators that show percentage completion, perhaps. Other visualizations are possible to demonstrate a range of data and where we are within that range. And then there's color by value, which I mentioned, that offers me the opportunity to actually change the color of shapes based on underlying data values. And again, remember, all of these are dynamic, so the presentation of all of them is dynamic and changes as the underlying data changes.
Hey, Scott, we got a question from Henry. He's asking, so you draw main Visio elements, define your data, populate the data, visualize the data, but can these main Visio elements themselves be driven by the data, like different placements, different shapes, etc., beyond the legend colors?
Excellent question. And the answer is absolutely yes. It might not happen with the shapes out of the box. It depends how the shapes were designed. But I've done that. John Marshall, I know, has done that. So for example, I have one client we did some custom shapes for a few years ago, that when you drop the shape on the page, it looks at its data values and positions itself on the right side of the page or the left side of the page automatically. So absolutely, it's possible to do that sort of thing. You might change the height, the width, the appearance of the shape in various ways. So these graphics provide a set of ways to visualize the data prescribed or predefined by Microsoft. But if you are willing to put a little of energy into designing a custom shape, I hesitate to say you can make it do anything, but you can probably make it do darn near anything. So great question, thanks. So where do you find all this stuff? It is that data tab. The data graphics section of the tab is where you'll find a gallery of graphic types and some buttons that allow you to position and reconfigure the graphics. Over on the right, there is an entry that says Advanced Data Graphics, and as you'll see in just a moment, when you click that, it will display a gallery of predefined graphics, either ones you've created or ones that might come with a particular diagram type. so that you can select a shape, go to the gallery, pick a way you want to visualize data for that shape or that set of shapes. So keep the questions coming. I'm more than happy to answer them as we go. But let me switch, and while you're thinking of questions, let me switch to a diagram and actually show you what this looks like in real life. Bear with me a second while I orient it here. Let's go to Visio and a blank flowchart. So I'm going to start with something really basic. All I did was go File, New, and open a flowchart. Most every one of you knows how to do that. So I'm going to start my flowchart very simply. I'm going to drop a shape on the page. I'm going to use the cool auto connect feature that allows me, and quick shapes that allows me to just sort of point and click to build out my diagram. I'll just add a couple of shapes in a couple of different directions here. So great, we now have shapes on the page. So what? Well, as I've mentioned, these shapes in a flowchart have predefined data fields. We don't know that yet because we don't have the window open, but let me right click, choose data and shape data, and the window opens. Now, the first time you open it, it'll probably look like this. It will probably be a small window floating over the drawing page. You can position your cursor and make it bigger so it has whatever dimensions you'd like. If you leave it floating, you may find you end up moving it occasionally to get it out of the way of whatever you're doing, especially if you zoom in on the diagram and you find that suddenly part of the diagram is underneath the shape data window. Well, I'm going to have to move it now. Because 95% of what I do in Visio involves data, I want this thing docked, and you can dock it on any of the 4 edges. Simply click the header and drag, and I'm going to drag it over to the right here, and it's now docked. So if I click on a shape, I see its data fields. If I click on this arrow, I see that, oh, look at this, the arrow doesn't have any data fields. But as soon as I click on the decision diamond, sure enough, there are those 7 fields again. So every one of these flowchart shapes has these predefined fields in it. I can, for example, type a process step number. Maybe this is step 140 or 134, and the owner is the, I don't know, is accounts payable. I'll just keep it brief so you don't have to watch me type badly. And I can fill in the rest of these fields. They are typed. So if I go to this date field, for example, I could actually type a date manually from the keyboard. But I can also pop down this calendar and say, you know what, this start date is the 14th of January in 2021. Naturally, as you would expect for any Office app, depending on how your Windows settings for region and language are set up, your date visualization or the representation of the date will match your Windows settings unless you do something in Visio to tell it to do it differently. All right, so that's one example. Let me do this. Let me start a flowchart. A swim lane diagram specifically, cross-functional flowchart, because I want to show you one cool thing, and that is that these data fields can either be populated by you manually, or it may be that what you do is rely on Visio to do some of that. So I'm going to take this process shape right here. Before I do anything with it, I'm going to label my swim lanes. So maybe this is sales and this is marketing. So fairly standard stuff so far, right? If I drop this into the sales field, notice what happened over here on the right. A field called function now says sales. Well, if I take this same shape and I drop it into the lane called marketing, that field now says marketing. How's that happening? Because not only do these shapes happen to have 7 predefined fields, but the field called function has a formula built into it. We're not going to get into the shape sheet and how all that formula magic can work behind shapes today, but that formula says to Visio, if I'm in a swim lane, display the name of the swim lane, the function associated with this swim lane in the field called function. But oh, by the way, if I'm not in a swim lane, notice the function field is now blank. So just don't show anything if I'm not in a swim lane. So it's quite possible to make pretty magical shapes in Visio. or take advantage of the work that somebody else has put in to create cool shapes. So how I mentioned that it was possible to create your own shape data fields. I showed you the dialog. Let's actually do that. I'm going to right click and choose data. And this time I'll choose define shape data. And let me zoom in on this dialog so you can see what I'm going to do. This is a way for me to look at the existing fields so I can see how the existing fields are defined. Or if I click the new button, I'm now able to create my own field. So as a business process guy, one of the things that my clients are always concerned about is key performance indicators of one sort or another. So I'm going to call this field KPI for key performance indicator. I'm going to say this is a numeric field. And when I do that, I can use the format box to indicate how I'd like this number to be represented. Do I want to restrict it to being a whole number? Do I want to allow decimals or include not only the number, but the unit of measure? So that's an easy option. I simply type 3 and 3 centimeters appears if I choose that option. And so I do have some choices there. I'll just leave it at the default. And if I want to provide a default value, I can do that simply by typing it in the value field. And then the prompt field is text that I can supply for the user of my diagram to be prompted to know what to do next. So enter KPI value. I'm just going to keep this really simple here. And now when I click OK, and let me get out of zoom mode here, notice that there's a field called KPI at the bottom of the list. And if I try to type text, I get a message from Visio that says entry must be a number because there is type associated with these fields, as you saw. If I do enter a number, 1, 2, 3, we're all set. Now, where did that prompt text go? It's right here. If I hover over KPI, you'll notice that it says enter KPI value, just as it will. There may be prompt text associated with some of these fields, apparently not for some of these predefined fields, but I want to be friendly for my user, so I add that extra little information for them. That makes sense so far? Any questions about the existence of these fields or how you can create data fields of your own? Okay.
Sorry,
Here's
Scott, I just missed this one for you. There is John. I have a feeling that John probably knows the answer to this, but he's asked why the shapes don't show their names.
Okay. The answer is because I don't want them to at this particular moment. So if you're referring to why isn't there text on the box, for example, I'm actually going to show you an easy way to make that happen, short of just typing it. So, and if you meant something else, John, different from that, John, let me know. But I'm going to show you a little bit more of the things you can do with your data as we get a little deeper.
He did say correct, so I guess you're on the right track with that one.
Okay, a good guess then. One other point I do want to make before I leave this is here I have this KPI field that I added. So yeah, that's good. But what if I add another process shape to the page? Would you expect to see the KPI field in that shape or not? And 2 seconds of suspense before I let go of the mouse button. And the answer is no. That field, the way I chose to add it was to add it to one specific shape. I did not add it to the master for the shape that's over here in the stencil. How to do that is beyond the scope of tonight, but I do want you to appreciate that if you have fields that you want to use in multiple shapes, there's a slightly different technique, but it's exactly the same idea. I'll also show you a way to add fields to multiple shapes at once in a second too. So I keep saying all these things that are coming up, so let me get on to them. All right, so we looked at visualization. Let's talk about another example. So here's a flowchart that already has data in the shapes. Notice my shape data window is open. I left it open in this diagram, and this shape, and this shape, and this shape, and for that matter, the document shapes have some data, not as much as the process steps themselves. The decision diamonds have some shape, have some data in them as well. So how did this data get here? One alternative is that I could type it all manually. I assure you that gets old really quickly, and I'll show you a better alternative, but it works. It works just fine. You saw me type some data. Now that it's here, what might I do with it? Well, let's create a data graphic. I'm going to, I want to visualize the status. So I see that this shape has a status field in it, as do the other flowchart shapes. So I'm going to go to the Data tab and go to this gallery that says Advanced Data Graphics. And right now, the only graphic that's available is with nothing displayed. I want to create a new graphic, so I will click exactly that entry. This dialog, let me zoom in, is the one where I do the 3 basic things that I suggested on my slide. I tell Visio what field I want to visualize. So let's go with the status field. And how do I want to visualize it? This is where I can choose among the 4 primary types. I'm going to start simple. I'll just go with text. And then the style gallery is available. So here's where I can choose from among those different styles. I'm just going to go simple. I'll choose heading 2, which is a text box that's underlined. Nothing fancy. And I'll let Visio put it wherever it wants to. Click OK, click OK. And do I want to apply this to the selected shape? I'm actually going to say no, because I want to apply it to more than just that one shape. So let's select the process shapes on this row and the ones down here as well. Now let's go back to that gallery where our new graphic is available. And look at that. We now have labels, but they're in really awkward positions. They say completed and and in progress and so forth, but they're buried behind other shapes. So here's a case where the default positioning isn't really worth much, but here's how easy it is to fix that. Go back to the gallery, right-click the graphic, choose Edit, and now I'm going to double-click and say, no, don't use the default. I want to put this centered horizontally, and let's put it above the top edge of the shape, so right above the shape. And click OK. I'll click Apply, and you can see that's not bad. May or may not be what I want in the end, but at least it's that easy just to create it in the first place and then move it somewhere. Maybe I want to add something a little bit more interesting, like how we're doing in terms of completion. So I happen to have a data field here called on-time percentage. And I want to represent that with one of those data bars. And I'll choose a progress bar as the style. And I will position this centered and underneath the shape, because that seems like a reasonable place to stick it. So right on the bottom edge, how's that? Click OK, click Apply, and there we go. So it's, I think you get the point here. It really is that easy, whether it's color by value or the icon sets. It's that simple to create shapes, to adorn shapes with visualizations of their internal data. Let's see, what's a good thing to show you next? How about we talk about, I know, one thing before I go back to the slides. I mentioned how easy the legend was to generate. So let's go back to the Data tab here. Here's that button I referred to that says Insert Legend. I've got 2 kinds of visualizations. Do I want those to be shown side by side in the legend or top and bottom? Let's go side by side because I have some space in the lower right corner of the diagram where I can probably fit this thing. Visio is going to drop it up in the top, and that's OK. I'm just going to move it down where I want it. Here's a question. It only shows 1 entry in the legend. The reason is because for text entries, we don't really need a legend. We don't need to have somebody explain what completed means or not started means. That's pretty obvious. If I had chosen an icon to represent status, or if I'd chosen a color by value, then those things would be added as well. And as a quick aside, just before I leave this diagram, I might want to change the theme associated with it because I might want a different color scheme. That's easy to do, just as you can in other Office apps. You can use the Design tab, in this case, to pick a different theme to make certain kinds of data more visible, is typically why I will use why I'll change the theme.
Hey, Scott, can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
On your Data tab, if you go back there for a second, your data graphics area is all grayed out at this point in time, and
Yes.
yet I think the other visual that you had, it was actually lit up. So how come? What's different between those things?
Yeah, very good question. The answer is that this particular section of the data tab is lit up when we have done what we're about to do next, which is link to external data. And if it otherwise, what I rely on is just using the gallery myself and exploring, creating the visualization types that I want. Oh wait, I'm going to make a liar of myself. There is a way to turn it on, and I occasionally forget about this. There's this button called Data Graphic Fields, and oh no, I actually was right. Yeah. So unless John Marshall remembers something, a deep secret that I've forgotten, it does require the linking, which we're about to do. So partial answer is it only applies in certain circumstances, but the good news is it's a set of circumstances that I want to use all the time. Because if you're me, I'm inherently lazy. I want software to do stuff for me. So I don't want to type a bunch of data in, especially if I already have data somewhere else. So let's talk about that, and then I can show exactly how that works. Visio has had for years, since 2007, the ability to link to data residing in a variety of different sources. It wouldn't be hugely surprising for you to know that Microsoft sources are first on the table. So I can connect to SharePoint lists, to Access databases, SQL databases, Excel, and via ODBC primarily, I can link to any data anywhere. So if your data happens to be in an Oracle database, or happens to be in Sybase or Salesforce or whatever, the ODBC is a very common database interface. So it turns out to be fairly simple to link to Azure SQL, to link to just about anything. Refresh can be done either manually, so the data changes, the diagram updates. Either manually, click a button. It's also on the data tab, no surprise. Or I can set a timer. Just right-click in the data window that we're going to see in a moment, and you can set a timer to say refresh this every 3 hours, every 1 minute, every 4 days, whatever you might think is appropriate. Here's the how-to for after the fact, if you want a copy of the PDF slides as a quick reminder. As I mentioned, Scott at visiostepbystep.com, and I'll be happy to send them to you. There are a couple of ways to link to external data. One is called custom import, and that's the one I'm going to use. Quick import has a very specific purpose. It allows you to link Visio diagram to data in Excel and have Visio make its best guesses at which fields should be visualized, and it will actually create visualizations for them. My success rate with getting the visualizations I actually want is on the low side, but it's a start. And then it's easy for me to make adjustments. But we're going to use the custom import, because then I can connect anywhere, pretty much do anything I want. And then there's a second piece that's required here, and that's the linked data. Oops, I already mentioned about the legend, sorry. The linked data function, I'll show you what that does too, because it's two things. I have to link the diagram to the data, and then I have to link individual rows of data to specific shapes. So let's do that. I have a version of a flowchart here that is devoid of data. So if I click on these shapes, you'll notice in the shape data window on the right, there isn't much there. There is a process step number, and that, if I click on them sequentially across the page, you'll see 100, 110, 120, and so forth. Those are there because I put them there, for reasons that will become clear just a moment. The other fields are right out of the box, empty. I happen to have data in Excel. So notice there's a process number down the left side. You can already imagine what I'm going to do with that based on what we just saw in the diagram. But I have fields called owner, which is one of the data fields in a Visio shape, a flowchart shape. I have a field called description. Now, let me go back to Visio again. There is no field called description. There are fields called start date and date status and cost. We've looked at those already. And I've also got a field here called risk and on-time percent, which are not standard default fields in the Visio flowchart shapes. Now, I colored those 3 column headings orange just so they stand out. Visio doesn't care what color they are. I just wanted to make it visibly obvious which were the predefined data fields and the corresponding columns, and which columns I've added here because I want that data in Visio, despite the fact those fields don't exist yet. So I'm going to close this and go back to Visio, back to the Data tab, and use the Custom Import button. And it's this dialog that allows me to say to Visio where to go to get the data. And notice the ODBC connection here. That will step me through a series of dialogues to create a data connection. I need a connection string and all the usual stuff to get to most databases, login credentials, that kind of thing. Keep it simple here. I'm going to use my Excel data. Click Next. Visio has now opened that Excel workbook and shows me, I'm sorry, it can't open it yet. I haven't told it which one. It is this one, 21. And click Next. And now it has opened it. And what I would see in this dropdown is a list of all the named ranges, tables, and sheets. So in this case, the tab that has my data on it that is of interest is Process Data. So I will go with that default. Click Next. Oh, by the way, notice Select Custom Range. Both that button and the next dialog allow me to take only part of the data from the Excel workbook. So I can say, I just need this much. I don't need everything that's there. Next, here's a kind of cool thing. Visio goes through the data, looks for what it suspects is the unique identifier for each row of data. And in this case, it found what looked like non-overlapping sequential or semi-sequential numbers in the process number field column. So it said, yeah, that looks good. Notice these are checkboxes. So if that's not the thing, and it's really start date, or maybe even a combination of fields, maybe it takes a couple of fields to create a unique ID, I have that complete flexibility. I'll go back to process number because, in fact, that's exactly correct. Click Next, and then click Finish. Now let me zoom back out, and what you'll see is something that you may not have seen before. If you haven't ever linked a diagram to data, then you wouldn't have, and that's the external data window. Notice the pop-up that says drag rows onto the page to link data to existing shapes or to add new linked shapes. Hold that thought. Other than that, we've got data fields here. Here's the owner field. Here's the description field, start date, end date, and so forth. If I were to do what that pop-up suggested, I could take, for example, row 100, and remember that this shape has a process number of 100. Well, it doesn't have to be pre-numbered. The shapes don't have to have a unique ID because I can take this row and I can drag it and drop it right on top of there. And look at that, that data, that field, that shape now has not only data in some of the existing fields perhaps, but it now has 3 new fields, description, risk, and on-time percentage. This shape, no additional data yet. This one, no. This one, no. Here's where, excuse me, slip of the mouse. Here's where being lazy is a good thing, because now what I'm going to do is let Visio do the grunt work. I've gone to the trouble of numbering each shape. So I'm going to go to the Link Data button, and I'm going to tell Visio, yes, link to all shapes on this page. Which column heading is it down here that contains the unique ID? It's called process number. So we want that field, that column, and that equates to which field inside Visio. In this case, they happen to have exactly the same name. They don't have to. So I'm just setting up the mapping between the data rows in the external data window and the fields in the shapes. I click Next, I click Finish, and now this shape is full of data, as is this one, and this one, and this one. Just as the display of data graphics is dynamic, this is a dynamic link too. So if I go back to Excel and change the data, I can click up here on the left on the data tab and click the refresh button and refresh, and the data in the diagram will be refreshed. I mentioned a timer if you want to explore that. right-click anywhere in the external data window, choose Configure Refresh, and here's a dialog that lets me set the timer for every X number of minutes. That timer operates whenever the diagram is open. So I just want to make sure that's clear. If the diagram is closed, then there's no timer running. But the cool thing is I've got all this data that somebody put into a database. I didn't have to type it. I just do link and I'm connected. Now I'm going to come back to John Marshall's question now. He said, how come these boxes don't have labels on them? Well, guess what? I put this description text in my Excel workbook along with the other data because I wanted to be able to have that displayed on the shape. And to do that, I don't actually even need to use a data graphic. I can use an age-old capability. This has probably been in Visio since Visio 1.0 or 2.0, somewhere back in those 20 plus years ago. And that's the ability to insert a field. So I'm going to take this row of shapes, for example, and on the Insert tab in Visio, I'm going to select Field and choose Shape Data. Zoom in so you can see that. Choose Shape Data. Here are all the data fields in my shapes, including the 3 that I just added, description, risk, and on-time %. Click Description, click OK, and look at that. This also is live, so it is not just text that I typed, it's text derived from the fields. So if I go to interview candidates, for example, and I change this to say interview more candidates, then the shape text displays updates immediately. So there is that method of representing contents of data fields onto a shape that's been around for a long time. It's not restricted to just one field. I can actually combine multiple fields into the text that appears on a shape if I want to. So if I have a network diagram and I have IP address and network name in my data, and I want both of those things to be displayed on every shape, pretty easy to do.
Okay, Scott, we got a question from Henry that I think this is probably the perfect time to actually ask this one. So we've just changed the data there from interview candidates to interview more candidates. It came originally from Excel. Will this write back to Excel? Does it write back to the database?
Brilliant question, Henry. Thank you. I'm glad you asked, because if you hadn't, I would have had to ask it myself. The answer is unfortunately no. So I'll tell you why, and then I'll tell you what we always recommend. The answer is no, because when Microsoft originally designed this data linking capability, they designed it as an import mechanism. So that's the way it is still implemented. You can, of course, write code to go both ways. And in our task map software, we do that. We have we build a pre-formatted Excel workbook for entering process data, and we provide a way to go both ways. But in this particular case, out of the box, this is an import capability. As a result, what we always recommend to our clients is if you link your diagram to data, treat the data source as the single source of truth and make all your data updates there, because it's so easy to refresh the diagram. That's what you want to do. All right, 10 after, I still have a few more minutes. That's good. I can show you a few more tricks. Let's let me show you this diagram. This is a task map, so I'll show you a more complete looking task map. This is one in which we have this is the same diagram that I was describing earlier that was linked to Project Online. I'm not actually linked to Project Online from this specific copy of the diagram at this moment. But I just wanted to show what a data-driven process map might look like when it happens to be here in Visio, and also what it looks like when I take advantage of a capability that has been around since SharePoint 2013 actively, and even more so these days, and that's the ability to store any Visio diagram, both the VSDX, which in Visio the open file format came along in the 2013 version. You Excel folks and Word folks had it before that. But the VSDX file format from 2013 and later, and the VSD format that existed for years and years before that, all I need do is save my diagram in either SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business, and you get this. This is the copy of that same diagram stored in SharePoint. And so I'm looking at the diagram. I can, zoom in and zoom out. I've got the scroll bars down here. So I've got decent navigation capabilities. I can pan and zoom simply by drag, or pan simply by dragging. I have shape info available. Notice the button here. So yes, we can visualize data on this diagram, but I also can see the data if I want to. So if I select the shape, here is all the data associated with that shape. In addition, if there are hyperlinks on this shape, then I will see those as well. So here's an example where I have a procurement standard operating procedure document, and it belongs to this task TA02. It's got a hyperlink on it. That's our hyperlink indicator there in Task Map. And sure enough, when I click on this thing, I see that the hyperlink is here, and a simple click, and I'm off to that document. So the hyperlinks we embed in any kind of diagram, process map or otherwise, are live in this rendering, and the update happens automatically. So in SharePoint Online, it's a default interval of 5 minutes. So if I make changes to the data, which affects the diagram, this web rendering of that diagram is just fine. It will get updated at a 5-minute interval unless I write code to make it happen sooner. And to extend the value, here's that org chart with some annotations and graphics on it. Let me switch and show you my phone. Bear with me just a second here. HR Movie Yonder, there we go. So here is my phone. Let's do this so you see only my phone. And this is my phone, by the way. This is live. If I turn my phone to the side, it will reorient. There we go. Not the best presentation for this particular map necessarily, but it's not bad. So here we are back to vertical format. This is exactly the same diagram. This capability allows you to view any Visio diagram in any browser on any device. And this truly does work on iPhones, iPads. This is my Android phone here. The same features that I showed in the web browser on my PC, I have that ability here too. So if I want to zoom in a little bit, I can. Hey, that's pretty good. I happen to zoom in on John by his pseudonym in my one of my books. Pan around through the diagram, happens to be my dad at the top there, and some other friends and family over here, other Visio MVPs and so forth. But the cool thing is, I can see the shape info if I want to. I can share the diagram simply by tapping share, as you do in any Office app, and I can provide a link. There's even a comment feature, which is a particularly cool thing. Someone with just a browser view of this diagram doesn't even have to have a Visio license. They can enter comments into the diagram. So there's a button here. Refresh. Where am I missing comment here? Oh, how about it's actually a button. It does. I don't even have to touch the ellipsis there. So here's comment. That opens a comment pane. If I click new comment and type my comment here in my phone and post it, if we go back to the browser rendering of this document, we'll see that comment. Of course, I have to have paid attention to see what I attached it to. It probably was the page, and I won't spend more than 10 seconds checking this out here, but if we refresh, let's see whether. I just need to open the comments pane. There it is. There's my gibberish comment entered on my phone, visible here in my browser. That comment is also visible if I open the same diagram directly in Visio. Does that seem useful? For me, this commenting extends the reach of the audience with whom I can collaborate on a diagram. With or without data, I don't care. But I can post a comment that says, "Hey, Christian Hess has fallen. Looks like he's falling behind on his training. Can somebody talk to him about that?" That we can actually use the diagram for communication. It probably wouldn't be that exactly. I might post a note during a review cycle, a comment during a review cycle to say, this process step looks like it hasn't been changed in 6 years. Is this really still the way we want to do this work? And as we collaborate on updating the process, we'll have a threaded set of comments to help us navigate. All right, now for what some of you have been waiting, what does Visio have to do with Power BI? And the answer is that as of a couple of years ago, there is a Visio custom visual for Power BI. You can find it, just go into the marketplace and search for Visio. It should be the first thing that pops up. Click add, and you'll have Visio there in your visualization gallery. This, for example, is what it looks like. If I drop a Visio visual, I can resize it. I can build whatever other visuals I want around it, drop the diagram in, link the diagram data to the other visuals with a result that looks kind of like this. So here's a facility monitoring scenario. We've got a floor plan that is linked to data so that we know here's Wyoming, Parker, and Liberty Anderson, Darrell Valencia, and so forth. We know which offices they're in because it shows up right on the map. Now, in this monitoring scenario, we have some expected temperatures by person that are represented here for this set of bar graphs across the top, expected temperature by room number, and actual temperature. So notice that the actuals are much hotter, in several cases particularly, than the expected temperatures. Now, just so far, I've already learned something from this dashboard. I understand that I've got 2 rooms in particular at 76 degrees, Fahrenheit, by the way, you probably guessed that, 76 degrees that are probably uncomfortable for the inhabitant. But what I don't know is where those rooms are, unless I've memorized what 2F-D004 means and 2FM010. But you know what? With this diagram embedded in this dashboard, I get context simply by doing this. Click on the red bar. Oops, okay, there we go. Click on the red bar and look at that. The diagram reoriented automatically. Let me zoom back out just a tad. And we see that that's that corner of the building. Both rooms are adjacent. If it happens that this is the southwest corner of the building and this building is in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's July, that may not be unusual. Maybe we need to install some shades or blinds or heavier duty blinds in this set of corner offices. But what's really powerful here is this is context for my data. And by the way, this works the other way as well. If I click on a room, the other visuals filter to show me the data for that room. So I can click on Holmes here, and there we go. There's Vivian Holmes in this room, and here's her temperature information over here. I love the clothing example that you used earlier this evening. This is a set of 7 demonstration visuals that Microsoft put together, and this one happens to be a clothing store. So here's another way to add value to your dashboard. I've got sales data over here. The black line represents the targets, and notice that we've got a couple of seriously underperforming clothing items here: suit coat and long sleeve something. Down below here is the stock. And we see that, you know what, for suit coats, we aren't selling many. And not surprisingly, I guess, the inventory is way over what we want our inventory to be. Meanwhile, in the floor, let's zoom in a little bit here, we see that we've got a couple of clothing racks that are red, a lot of blue, some green. That obviously must have some significance. What happens if we want to explore suit coats? Well, let's click on and filter for suit coats. There we go. So now, again, we know that sales are bad for suit coats. We know we've got too much inventory. Let's zoom out just a little bit. And you know what? We see that that rack happens to be in the back corner where there's work going on. Notice the red triangle here, work in progress. So we aren't selling suit coats in part because nobody can get to them, or it's really hard to get to them. And the same thing is probably true for the other things that are red here. In some cases, that's the case. In other cases, it may just be merchandise that's badly out of fashion and no one wants to buy it. So maybe we need a sale to get rid of it. But the real point here is I've got more insight into what's going on in my business simply by having a diagram type that I'm probably using already for some other purpose. I'll just show you as an example as I say that. Here's a process map where we're mapping against the process steps. We're mapping how we're doing generating leads and what sort of actuals versus our target lead generation, color coding based on how we're doing against those targets. So I diagram types that I'm probably already using anyway, and I can add more value to my business folks by including the flow chart or the org chart and being able to filter data to see who's involved in certain kinds of operations or certain kinds of data results. And so to wrap up, any Visio shape can contain data. And as you've already seen, many already do, you can create your own data by typing it in, or even better, link it to existing data sources so you don't have to type. There are pre-built visualizations that you can take advantage of. You can also build your own collection of graphics. And I didn't point this out, but with those things like the flags, the 5 different colors of flags, I said an icon set can be 2 to 5 icons. You can build your own icon sets. David Parker, Visio MVP in the UK, has written a handy little utility that he makes available on his website, which is on the next slide, I believe. And you're welcome to download his free utility, assemble your own collection of 3 or 4 or 5 icons, and turn it into your own visualization set. Adding insight to your data and visualizing that, being able to see and gain insight is possible by using the Power BI custom visual. David's website is 2 slides away, excuse me. So here are a couple of links that will get you to more information about Visio, including where to get answers to questions. That's the answers.microsoft.com Visio section. I hang around at Experts Exchange answering Visio-related questions there, so you'll see that link at the very bottom here. If you're interested specifically in those demos I showed for Power BI, this aka.ms/Visio PBI will let you play with them yourself. They're all publicly available. There's a good support article from the Visio team about the integration with Power BI. And here are a couple of the other MVPs who have recurring blogs. Chris Roth, some of you may know, longtime MVP, former employee of Visio Corporation before it was acquired by Microsoft, hung around for a little while at Microsoft and then went off on his own. VisGuy.com is one of the best collections of Visio information on the internet. David Parker is the guy I mentioned a moment ago, bvisual.net, and go look for his blog. You'll find a ton of articles about all kinds of arcane and wonderful Visio subjects, especially Power BI. David is probably first or second in the world in terms of the things that he's done to integrate Visio and Power BI. I mean, it boggles my mind to see what he creates. John Goldsmith is another MVP in the UK. He's got also a very technically focused blog. Michel Leplan in France has what I assume is a wonderful blog, but I don't speak French, so I can't help you there. Those of you who do, check it out. And this is information about me and stuff that I've done. Here are some of my LinkedIn learning courses over here on the left. And TaskMap, if you're interested, I mentioned taskmap.com. We also provide shape design, custom stencils, custom templates, that sort of thing. I've got some books and a website and that sort of stuff. And finally, my email again, scott@visiostepbystep.com. I'd be happy to provide a PDF of these slides for anyone who's interested. For anyone who's interested. I hang around on Twitter occasionally at VizProcess, and I'm usually monitoring the Visio keyword, among other things. My LinkedIn profile, book website, and taskmap.com. So, Ken, with that, I'm finished with what I wanted to show. Happy to answer any additional questions if there are any.
Cool. We got a question and we got a comment. This John Visio guy seems to think that there's a website missing off your list. Something about johnvisiomvp.ca. I can't say I've been there myself, but we should probably check that out.
Please post that in the chat if since I failed to add it to my slide.
he's actually put it in there, so it's there as well. Then I've got a question from Mauricio, which says, if the Visio file is embedded in SharePoint, will the data refresh capability still work? Will the trigger be through an automatic timer, or does it require a manual refresh from the user?
Read that back again a little slower, please.
All right. If the Visio file is embedded in SharePoint,
yep,
will the data refresh capability still work?
Yes.
Does it need an automatic, or does it work with a timer, or does it need some kind of a manual refresh from the user or a trigger? How would that work?
Excellent point, or excellent question. There is a 5-minute timer that runs in the background. So if the diagram is stored in SharePoint Online, and the underlying data changes, and the diagram therefore changes, then the web rendering, if you're looking at it in your browser, will update every 5 minutes. If you want to write some code, you can make it be whatever interval you want it to be.
Perfect. All right. And I feel like I just want to quickly go and just share my screen for a second here, because because he's a friend and I've already just given him a hard time and everything else about this. So I'm going to go and put this up. This is the other website that wasn't on your list. This is John's Visio website and his cool little wizard over here, and he's got a bunch of stuff up there. So another resource that is out there as well. So sorry, John, not to poke fun at you all the time on these kind of things, but
and John, I apologize. I know you've been putting a lot of effort into that website in the last 6 months, particularly, and it's my fault that I failed to add it to the slides. I will do that as soon as we end.
All right. So outside of that, are there any other questions at all that we have for Scott from anyone? I'll give you a chance to jump in and feel free to come on live on the chat. You don't have to put it into the chat window. If you would like to ask a question directly, you're more than welcome to.
I'll also ask a question of all of you. I'm curious, based on what you've seen, for the majority who didn't know that you could even have data in a Visio diagram, for the majority of you in that category, does this look useful? Can you envision use cases for having data in a diagram and being able to visualize it?
So I'll say personally, I definitely can. I see Cindy's just thrown into the chat to say it's definitely useful. One of the big questions that I'm sort of struggling with on this one, Scott, is that for ages and ages, when we've been looking at this stuff, every time I've tried to do something, it always seemed to require a Visio Plan 2 subscription. Now, as you were going through some things, I actually popped open Visio 2019, which is what I have on my desktop, and it seemed like most of those features were there. So I'm wondering if some things have actually changed there, but
not that I'm aware of. The distinction that's important, Ken, is the distinction between in the desktop world, that is the traditional Visio world, it's the standard edition that does not have the data visualization or data linking. You need Visio Professional, but this goes back to 2007. So Visio Professional 2010, 2013, 2016, 2019, they all have those data linking and data visualization capabilities.
Gotcha. Cool.
So that's the critical distinction.
All right, cool. That's a good part, because the pro license I've got, that's not an issue. But and then the next part of it for me is like I'm going, that integration with Power BI starts looking really, really, really interesting. I can see that. John says John Peltier says I can envision use case. The problem is the licensing bit where Visio isn't really part of Office subscription that we all have, and that's a challenge. So though. John, I can tell you from the MVP side, you can install Visio 2019 next to your Office 365 subscription.
Yes.
It just is not necessarily 100% easy in my experience. But
yeah, and the problem is, Ken, I can do that. You can do that, but people out there that could make use of this,
I know
their brains would explode.
I know it's kind of it's part of Office, but not really part of Office. Part that always struck me as kind of odd. I've never figured out why Visio is not a full-fledged member of the family.
let me explain it this way, and I'm not trying to justify Microsoft's actions here, trust me, but both Visio and Project have always been licensed separately. So they are under the umbrella, the Office umbrella, but both have always been licensed separately, and that's still true. Project Online, separate license. Visio Plan 2, separate license.
Yeah, and that's kind of too bad. I used to use Visio an awful lot back before Microsoft acquired it. So this is probably what, in the late 90s or something.
20 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 20 years ago. And Microsoft acquired it, and I was thinking to myself, oh, great, they can take some of these neat capabilities of Visio and merge them with PowerPoint or with the shapes in Excel and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And they never seemed to really do that. And then I no longer was able to use Visio because my company had just plain old vanilla Microsoft Office license, and Visio wasn't part of that.
Right.
And I just drifted away, and I kind of regret it in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But
it is unfortunate, John, that the marketing decisions about Visio and indirectly Project, but about Visio just haven't made a lot of sense. If the company really wanted to have Visio more widely used, why make it this extra step harder?
Why make it so hard?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even within Office, there are so many different segmentations of the product and the licenses that you need like a PhD to figure it out.
Yeah.
And
how's that working for you, John?
My PhD's in the wrong field. So
I noticed another question. Let's see, I saw it a minute ago. Oh, from David. Does Visio embedded in SharePoint and Power BI work if the user doesn't have Visio installed? The answer is yes. The rendering of the Visio diagram inside Power BI is exactly the same rendering that happens if you point any web browser, like my phone, for example, at a Visio diagram stored in SharePoint or OneDrive for Business, either one. So yes, the good news is you can have a Visio license, create the Power BI dashboard, embed the Visio diagram in it, and publish that link, and anybody can use it. So you'll find that the aka.ms/Visio PBI link that I shared, if you can point any browser at that, whether you have Visio or not, and you'll be able to see the diagrams.
Cool. I always like that. It's more fun that way.
Yeah. A little more egalitarian.
Well, it's always the challenge with, just the Power BI side is where everybody has to have the pro license. If they start adding pro licenses on for every other software as well, that gets unmanageable, right? So it's nice to know that part works without that additional components on top. So
yeah, it really is. I mean, the power of being able to share a diagram that anybody can look at on their phone, or picture a factory floor diagram where we've got some data we're popping up about performance of various workstations along the factory floor. I'm walking around the factory with my iPad, and I'm looking at near real-time visualizations of the performance of my factory floor. No Visio license required.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, calls for more questions. If there's any others out there at all, please fire them into the chat or come online and talk now. Otherwise, I guess if we don't hear anything from anyone else, we'll wrap this one up and say thanks, Scott. That was a fantastic presentation, eye-opening and whatnot. Enjoyed having you with us, and hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime in 2021. Yeah,
that sounds like a plan. And
awesome.
I am one of those people for whom Vancouver is top 5 cities anywhere. So I'm always looking for an excuse to come visit. So.
Well, maybe at some point in the future, we'll actually get back to the point where we can do these kind of things in person in a room where the people can actually, talk to each other face to face. That's what we're looking forward to. But
yeah, absolutely.
Like a year from now, right?
Yeah, well,
in October. In October a year ago, I was in Vancouver to speak at a business analyst conference, So that was the last time I was there, and it's unfortunately going to be the last time for a while, but I'm looking forward to an excuse.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for this, Scott. We very much appreciate it. This has been a fantastic show, a great way to end off our year here. And I want to thank everybody else for coming and supporting us throughout the year as well. And we'll be back in early 2021 with more material, and we look forward to seeing then. So until then, have a safe and a happy holiday season. We'll see y'all in 2021.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody for the nice comments in the chat. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's good. Thanks, Ken.
You bet.
Bye.